My Hero Academia is one of the greatest mangas ever. You've all seen it in some form or another if you're a fan of Japanese culture. It is one of the best and most popular mangas and animes in history, beloved by people all over Japan as well as the rest of the world. Created by manga author Kohei Horikoshi, Horikoshi stated that after his previous projects were not successful, he was sad and out of ideas. In order to get more ideas, he revisited a one-shot he previously published for Akumaru Jump, titled My Hero. Horikoshi was also a big fan of American films and comics like Spider-Man, directed by Sam Raimi, Star Wars, and the X-Men, which he used for inspiration. Horikoshi has also cited Dragon Ball, Ultraman, and Kamen Rider as sources of inspiration as well. And if you do follow the series, its main character shares a lot of traits with Spider-Man, and Kohei Horikoshi just kept trying to turn him into Spider-Man, honestly. So in 2014, he penned My Hero Academia for Shonen Jump, published by Shueisha. It couldn't have come at a better time, since the magazine at that point was struggling to find its newest hit, since Naruto had recently ended. After massive success came the idea for an anime. A producer for the manga picked the studio Bones to produce their anime, as they had wide reach internationally and produced high quality animation. And yeah, they were totally right. The anime is directed by Kenji Nagasaki and written by Yosuke Kuroda. The anime launched in 2016 and came over to the US in 2018 fully dubbed. I love this series. I'm not a massive fan of anime or manga, but I've always been a big superhero and comics fan, so when a close friend of mine recommended it to me, I figured why not check it out. And I was blown away at how invested I got into the story. No joke, by the end of Volume 2, I was hooked. And so was everyone else. My Hero is a massive hit, not only for Japan, but even more so in America, spawning a current 40 volumes of the manga, 7 seasons of the anime, not to mention spin-off manga, movies, specials, toys, and other media. The story has ended though, as Japan had finished producing the final chapter. So without further ado, my name is Rocko from Ream Lore, and let's dive in. Also, consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video. Our first episode is Izuku Midoriya Origin. We open on the deadliest battlefield known to man, the playground. This is where we meet our main character, Izuku Midoriya, or Deku as he will soon be referred to. Kid Deku, with tears in his eyes, gets ready to defend a kid from some bullies when my joke from before becomes reality, as the bullies have superpowers and the main bully says to him, "You don't stand a chance without a quirk," and they proceed to beat him up off screen, the most painful way to beat someone up. After that, we hear the defining line of the series, "Not all men are created equal." We get some more narration from Midoriya talking about how he's going to be a hero, and we cut to the future as Midoriya is graduating from middle school, now played by the very talented Justin Briner, who is also awestruck by a giant villain attack. We get our theme song, and yeah, they change up the theme a little bit, so I won't mention them that much, but just to let you know, they're all good, with all the anime charm of every anime you've ever seen. We then get Midoriya explaining in more detail the premise of the show. A long time ago, a baby was radiating light, being the first person to develop a mutation like that. After that, more people with superpowers started to pop up, dubbing these people as having quirks. This world became a superhuman society, with over 80% having some sort of quirk. With great power though comes great responsibility, and when you can bench press trains, it becomes too tempting to use these powers to do whatever you want. So with supervillains on the rise, the profession of superhero became very common. Back to the present, some superheroes show up to defeat the bad guy in some impressive fight scenes. Props to the animation team for this and all of the fights following this. The one thing I didn't like about the manga was that the fight scenes were a bit lackluster in the beginning. It wasn't until Stain showed up that we started to get some fun ones. Here though, man, are you guys in for a ride. The superheroes include Death Arms, played by Chris George, who is strong, Backdraft, played by Chris Bryan, who is a fireman, Kamui Woods, played by Aaron Roberts, who is a woodbender, and Mount Lee, played by Jamie Marchi, who can grow giant. You'd think with such a big cast they would have a bunch of people voice the characters, but everybody has their own individual voice actor or dubbed actor. I normally go in depth with a voice actor, but literally every single character in My Hero have their own individual voice actor, and even I have my limits. So I'll mention names I recognize, but that is where I draw the line. Ripping off the band-aid now, I'm watching the dub. I'm sorry, but I grew up with dubbed anime, and dubbing has improved massively since the 4Kids days, so deal with it. I'm not saying subbed is bad or that the original voice actors do a bad job, because they do a great job. It's just my inner child prefers the dub. While this fight is going on, however, everybody's super calm about it, chatting as if nothing was going on. They were all like, "Honey, my train is gonna be late. This guy is some amateur criminal. It's gonna be a minute." It really shows how common this sort of thing is. Midoriya on the side is geeking out, and to make him super relatable to anyone watching, he's a massive fanboy of superheroes. As Kamui is about to finish off the big bad, Mount Lady stole the final shot and then gets all the credit for the arrest. I like this because it shows that even though this world seems amazing, it's not perfect, as these heroes are fighting to see who can take out the bad guy first. This moment is also where I want to introduce something to make a point regarding this show, and that is the questionable counter. If you didn't know, at minor points in the series, they overly sexualize women for comedic purposes. Now I'm gonna make it clear I don't usually have a problem with it, I'm not really a prude, and if this was happening to just the adults in the show, I wouldn't care that much, but the fact that half the time it's sexualizing or perving on teenage girls, it just makes me a little uncomfortable and clashes with everything else going on in the show. So yeah, I love this series to death, but I was lying if it wasn't bad in a few spots. We add our first digit to the questionable counter. It goes up by 1 because Mountain Lady shows off her truck to the fans. Midoriya explains further that while quirks were popping up, the governments didn't know what to do and were too busy creating new quirk laws when there was a spike in superpowered crime. But then heroes started to pop up saving people, and because of that they were given authority by the government to be an expansion of law enforcement. With the asterisk that those who perform the most got all the fame and money. After the fight, Midoriya is writing down everything he saw and says he wants to be a hero more than anything. At Midoriya's school, their teacher is asking about what the kids in the school want to do with their lives, but stops himself as he knows they just want to be heroes, or more accurately join the hero track. It's here though where we see getting a quirk might not be the best thing ever, because there are some really lame ones, like having an inflatable head and the ability to stretch your eyes out. Out of the cheering though, the bully from the opening interrupts and says, "Don't lump me in with these losers." This is Katsuki Bakugo, and his character is basically I'm Teenage Vegeta, played by Clifford Chaplin. He goes on to say that his classmates would be lucky if they were sidekicks to some D-lister. Yeah, his personality is explosive hothead who doesn't care what other people think of him. It's then revealed that Bakugo is going to apply to UA High School, which is the national school with a 0.2% acceptance rate for the hero track. Now I want to say this real quick. Originally Horikoshi wanted this to be a college, which explains why they're applying to a high school for some reason. But I think it was a producer or somebody who said the kids would relate to it more if the characters were high school students. And on some level I agree with that, but on the other hand it makes some creative decisions really awkward, which I will probably talk about some other time. Bakugo, with his really scary face, then says he's going to get into UA and become the richest, most famous hero of all time. The teacher then, for some reason, maybe he hates Midoriya, says to the entire class that Midoriya wants to apply as well, and then everybody starts laughing at him, and this is where we find out he doesn't have a quirk like everyone else. Bakugo then assaults Midoriya on school grounds, proving my theory the teacher hates him, and then Bakugo yells at Midoriya and says he is the worst of the worst and UA is never going to accept him. He also calls Midoriya Deku, which is a diss and something Bakugo has been calling him since they were kids. Midoriya cowers back and says he doesn't want to compete against Bakugo, but he still wants to try, and everybody laughs again. Back downtown, a sludge villain is stealing some cash when a muscular man arrives to chase the villain. With a big smile on his face, he says, "I am here." Back at school, Bakugo is still picking on Midoriya with his buddies and explodes Midoriya's notebook. Bakugo says that some people have it and others don't. When they look at him, they see greatness, but when they look at Midoriya, they see nothing, or Deku. Yeah, to explain, if you rearrange the letters in Izuku, his first name, you get Deku, which is a shortened version of good for nothing. Bakugo says don't apply or else, and then says in the most casual tone possible, take a swan dive and maybe you'll be born a hero in your next life. Geez, that would not fly in an American superhero show. Later, Midoriya fished his book out of the water and he flashed back to when he was a kid, watching the greatest hero of all time, All Might's debut, when he saved hundreds of people from a natural disaster. All Might then drops the famous line, "Fear not, citizens, hope has arrived because I am here." Midoriya was so inspired by this. When he got his quirk, he would be the greatest hero ever, just like All Might, when a doctor tells him he's not getting a quirk. This is Dr. Garaki, who is more of a background character here but becomes important later on. We learn that around 4 years old, kids develop one of their parents' quirks or a combination of the quirks, but an x-ray on Deku's foot shows since he has double joints on his toes, just like the 20% without a quirk, it's unlikely he will develop one himself. Midoriya is heartbroken over this and just watched the All Might video over and over again, and tearfully asks his mother if it's possible for him to be a hero like All Might, someone who saves people with a smile and never gives up, and his mom, Inko, played by Jessica Kavanaugh, says that she is sorry, but that's not what Midoriya needed to hear. Midoriya decided to press on and continue to try no matter what anyone said, which is when the sludge villain from earlier shows up and attacks Midoriya, planning on using him as a skin suit to escape. It looks like Midoriya is going to suffocate when All Might shows up and saves him without any issue, hitting the sludge villain with a Texas smash, which is just blowing a burst of wind at the sludge villain. When Deku wakes up, he freaks out because All Might is there. All Might is just joking around as he reveals he captured the sludge villain in some soda bottles. All Might, real name Toshinori Yagi, is played by Christopher R. Sabat. He is a voice actor who has voiced Zoro from One Piece, as well as Yami from Black Clover, and Piccolo and Vegeta from Dragon Ball, as well as a million other things. He is a tremendous guy. Midoriya wants All Might to sign his notebook, but he already did. As All Might is about to leave, however, Deku hangs onto him in the most cursed drawing of the entire manga and anime series, where the wind is blowing past his face. While flying in the air, however, All Might coughs up some blood. They land on a roof and All Might tries to leave again, but Midoriya asks him the question he's been afraid to ask. He asks if it's possible to become a hero even if he doesn't have a quirk, ending the episode on a cliffhanger. And I was standing there like, Deku, haven't you heard of Batman or Black Widow, heroes who don't have any powers? They seem to do just fine. That brings episode 1 to an end, but how does it rank? How do my rankings work? Well, there are 4 criteria for my ratings. First is characterization. How characters are depicted factors greatly into the ratings. If they are clearly defined and showcased, then they rank higher. Second is story. How the story progresses from start to finish factors into the ratings. If it's dynamic and interesting, it gets a high score. If it's plotting and boring, it gets a low score. Third is entertainment. How fun something is plays a big part. If you're not enjoying what you're watching, there's no point in viewing. Fourth is importance. How necessary is it for you to watch? In our new world of streaming and rewatching, there's too much to watch. If something is noteworthy, it gets a high score. If it's something you can live with missing, it gets a low score. They will be judged in 5s, 5 being the best and 0 being the worst. However, on certain occasions, if I think something is truly noteworthy, I will go above or below certain parameters. If I think something is exceptionally good, I will give it a 6 or higher. If I think something is exceptionally horrendous, I will go lower than 0. Well, characterization could get a 6 for me. I feel like the characters were very strong here. I mean, Deku, his mom, All Might, Bakugo, everybody was great here and defined really well. The story gets a 5. It's a strong opener to the series, giving us a premise quickly, but also not, exposition dumping on us constantly. Entertainment gets a 3. It is pretty fun, although we don't get much action aside from the opening scene. It's still very entertaining. Importance also gets a 5. It is the opening scene that introduces us to our main characters, and it's really important that you watch. Moving on, we're heading on to episode 2, What It Takes to Be a Hero. Episode 2 starts off with their conversation on the roof, where All Might suddenly starts to collapse in pain with steam coming off him. Midoriya explains his whole backstory while this is happening, how people think he doesn't have a chance, with no powers he's a weakling, but he wants to prove them wrong. Midoriya has always believed saving people is the coolest thing ever. He wants people to see his smile and feel safe, and be the kind of hero that everyone looks up to. Ironically though, when Midoriya does look up, All Might has changed drastically. He's now a kind of skinny dude with spiky hair and sunken eyes, which causes Midoriya to freak out. Back in the alleyway, we see that Bakugo feels no remorse for assaulting Midoriya and telling him to jump off a roof as he kicks a bottle in the alleyway. Bakugo even says he hates it when Midoriya talks about heroes. Unfortunately for Bakugo, the bottle he just kicked was the sludge villain from before who attacks him. Midoriya thinks that this All Might is an imposter, but he proclaims he is All Might as blood flows out of his mouth. He says that his muscle form is like when guys at the pool are sucking in their guts and flexing trying to look buff. All Might then goes on to say that while he is a hero who smiles at any situation, there's plenty of fear behind it. He shows Midoriya a nasty scar under his stomach. His respiratory system was destroyed and he lost his whole stomach in a fight a few years ago. Now I assume he means he got a new stomach, but it took me a few seconds and I just thought he was the toughest guy ever. He says that the surgeries have worn him out and it can't be fixed, so right now he can only work for 3 hours a day. All Might says that this fight was a secret, as it has ties to him being the symbol of peace. That means people have to think he is never afraid, but he smiles to hide the fear inside because the job isn't easy. Some villains just can't be beat without powers, so All Might tells Midoriya that he doesn't think he can be a hero without a quirk. But I was sitting here like, All Might, you do know Batman and Iron Man, right? They don't have powers. In fact, a lot of villains in Marvel and DC don't have powers, they just make gadgets. All Might says that if Midoriya wants to help people, he should be a policeman, even if they don't do much because of the heroes, and that there's nothing wrong with having a dream, but you need to make sure it's attainable, and this shocks Midoriya to the core. Meanwhile, the sludge villain has taken Bakugo and is using his explosion quirk to cause some serious damage. Death Arms and all the other heroes from before show up to try and stop him, but none of them are suited for this situation. All Might arrives on the scene, but he ran out of time and can't transform or use his powers. Midoriya, in the meantime, finds himself at the sludge villain fight and realizes that All Might dropped the bottle because of him. All Might is berating himself, as Midoriya is as well. That is until Midoriya sees Bakugo's eyes and how much he needed to be saved. That is when Deku sprinted into action, backed by the most awesome theme song to ever grace anime, You Say Run. You Say Run is the best track in any anime. It's a super energetic, epic orchestral masterpiece, making whoever listens to it get the urge to run a marathon or punch the sky. It's so good. It was composed by Yuki Hayashi, who has done a ton of music work for other popular animes, but this is his magnum opus. I'm not kidding, I think this series got an entirely new fan base from this song alone. There was a whole movement on YouTube saying, You Say Run goes with everything. That wasn't true, as I'll show you in a later video, but it did fit the most epic moments in pretty much any great fight scene. Deku threw his backpack at the sludge villain, which blinded him enough to get to Bakugo, who couldn't believe he was there. Deku says that his legs just started moving as he tries to get the sludge off Bakugo. Deku says he couldn't just sit there and watch Bakugo die, which strikes a chord with All Might, who decides to help no matter the cost. As the sludge villain goes to kill Deku, All Might swoops in and stops him, pushing past his limit. All Might then goes totally overboard and hits the sludge villain with a Detroit Smash, which is so powerful it not only dissipates the villain and allows All Might to grab Bakugo, it also changes the weather patterns around them. That's right, it was so strong it literally moved the wind around, meaning that he could make it rain if he wanted to, with his fist! The villain is not dead, I didn't make that clear, he somehow survived, and everyone cheers because of course they do. The heroes yell at Midoriya saying he could have been killed because he doesn't have a quirk, but they praise Bakugo for his bravery and admire his powerful quirk. This is another example of quirk praise, where those with powerful quirks are hailed as saviors, while those with weak or no quirks are viewed as lesser citizens. This is incredible because it's actually the opposite of X-Men. In those stories, it's always the superpowered mutants who are viewed as monsters or lower class citizens, while here if you have a quirk, you are cut above the rest and the quirkless are tossed to one side. Bakugo couldn't give two hoots about the praise, however, he was just thinking about what happened with Midoriya. As Midoriya was walking home, Bakugo followed and screamed at him that he doesn't owe him anything because he didn't do anything, he would never ask for his help because he is a weakling. He goes on to say Midoriya is nothing and that he won't even cut it as a beat cop. I love this guy so much. Midoriya is confused, as I would be. I mean, that is Bakugo's version of a thanks for trying, but Midoriya isn't thinking about that. Instead, he is really sad and has to get back to giving up on his dreams, which is when All Might appears. He changes back to his normal state before saying thank you, but he mostly came here to discuss his question from earlier. If it wasn't for Midoriya telling All Might about his life and his drive, as well as him jumping into action with no training or quirk, All Might would have been a worthless bystander and Bakugo might be dead right now. All Might says there are stories about many heroes and how they became great. Their bodies move on their own before they had a chance to think, just like Midoriya. Midoriya starts to cry as he falls to his knees. He thinks back to when he was a kid and he wanted his mother to tell him what All Might says to him right now, that Midoriya can be a hero. This scene is amazing, by the way. All the music and the lighting and the animation, it's just so good. This episode ends with Midoriya saying this is the story of how he became the world's greatest hero. That brings episode 2 to a close, and how does it rate? Well, characterization could get a 5. Everybody's super strong in this one as well. Bakugo even showing more sides to his personality. Story also gets a 5. It is a strong story showing that Midoriya does have what it takes to be a hero despite not having a quirk in what everybody tells him. Entertainment also gets a 5. It is so entertaining because of Yusei Run just on its own. Like, Yusei Run could just boost anything to a 4 on this list personally. Importance also gets a 5. It is mega important. It's when All Might tells him you can be a hero and really defines his and Midoriya's relationship. Moving on from that, we have Roaring Muscles episode 3. Episode 3 starts off with Midoriya going in depth about who All Might is. Basically this world's Superman. He is the world's most popular hero. His age is unknown for some reason, his quirk is unknown, and because of his abilities, he became the #1 hero. His presence alone dropped crime rates, which is a trademark Batman power. All Might claims that Midoriya is worthy of inheriting his power before going in depth on what his power is. His whole career, he had been dodging the question of what his quirk is. Most people just assume it's some sort of super strength or invulnerability. He does this because as the symbol of peace, he needs to be a hero born with a quirk like everyone else, when in reality this power was given to him by someone else, and All Might wants to give it to Midoriya. This freaks out Midoriya, as up until now, giving someone a quirk is unheard of. All Might says that this power is called One for All. One person improves the power and gives it to the next person, each person making it stronger and stronger. All Might has been in search for a successor until he saw Midoriya run in without hesitation today, so he's chosen Midoriya. Midoriya starts to cry, which is a trademark for him as you've seen, when he stands up and says he will do this. Although as we'll see, it will be no easy task to get this power. All Might also calls him a quirkless fanboy here, and that is my new favorite insult. It makes no sense, but it's so funny. So after a whole conversation about All Might telling Midoriya he's worthy of inheriting his power, in the next scene he says Midoriya isn't worthy of inheriting his power. What he means is that Midoriya in his current state can't take his power. His body is too weak. Right now, his arms and legs would shoot off if he tried. That is why Midoriya is training on the beach, which is littered with junk from the ocean. So before he can get One for All, Midoriya must clean up the entire beach. Midoriya says that he wants to go to UA, so he has to prepare for the quirk in 10 months. So All Might prepped a schedule for him. Looking at the schedule, he has to get up at 4 a.m. and go to bed at 11. Jeez, that is rough. Which All Might confirms that this is going to be super hard. Midoriya doesn't care though, as working harder than his classmates has always been his thing. Thus, in Midoriya's words, he began 10 months of hell, and we get a montage of Midoriya training Rocky style. Although instead of running through Philly and punching meat, Midoriya is doing community community service. We stop the montage as Midoriya collapses while running with All Might. All Might figures out that Midoriya is overworked because during the montage he made alterations to the schedule which was fine-tuned with Midoriya in mind. Midoriya says in defiance that he has to work harder, otherwise he won't stand a chance, because he wants to be like All Might, the greatest hero in the world. All Might becomes inspired again and agrees to get Midoriya back on schedule. Then it was the morning of the exam, where back on the beach, Midoriya is doing his best Asta impression as he screams to the sun while on top of a mountain of trash. All Might is super impressed with this as Midoriya collapses and falls off the mountain of trash, but All Might catches him. All Might gives Midoriya a before and after shot of him from 10 months ago and him now. All Might then takes a lock of his hair from his head and tells him to eat it. All Might explains that to transfer the power, Midoriya has to swallow some of his DNA. I then think he force feeds it to Midoriya as I hear him scream when we cut to UA High School, where the entrance exam is taking place. While Midoriya is walking, he mentions how he doesn't feel any different when Bakugo shows up and insults him because that's his trademark. Midoriya is determined to pass the exam and get into UA when he falls down and a girl catches him with her levitating quirk. This is Uraraka, played by Lucy Christian, who is very nice to Midoriya and even makes small talk with him. Probably the first person other than All Might or his mom that treat him with any sense of kindness before she walks off. Everyone is gathered in the lecture hall as Bro Hero President Mike, played by Sony Strat, later played by Dave Trasco, explains the practical exam. We learn that there are two exams happening at once, with Midoriya going one way and Bakugo going the other way, as to make sure friends from the same school don't help each other. There are going to be robot villains everywhere ranging from 1 to 3 point values. You need to take them out and raise your score like a video game. Before Mike could explain more though, a student from the crowd interrupts and asks why there are 4 robots on the exam card. This is Ida, played by the very talented J. Michael Tatum, who is super enthusiastic about school and says that UA should make mistakes like this. Ida is also on the Midoriya hate train as he says that his muttering is annoying and that he should leave if he isn't going to take this seriously. Honestly, if you told me this show wasn't about superheroes or deep society themes, it was about berating and bullying Midoriya, I would have believed you. Mike tells him to calm down as he explains the 4th villain is worth 0 points. He's mainly just an obstacle. And this is where we get the school motto, go beyond plus ultra. That brings episode 3 to an end. Characterization gets a 5. The new characters are introduced very well. We get a feel for their personalities, but we know there's going to be more to them down the line. Story also gets a 5. It's nice seeing Midoriya train and finally get the power he earns through this training exercise. Entertainment also gets a 5. It's just kind of fun. I just like heroes doing hero stuff like cleaning up trash. It's just a personal favorite of mine. Importance also gets a 5. It is the episode where Midoriya gets 1 for all. Like, he doesn't use it here, but just getting it brings it up to number 5. And everything else is super important too. We have Start Line, episode 4. We start off this episode with Midoriya telling us why getting into UA is so important. The best heroes around are alumni of UA High School. All Might, of course, but also the number 2 fiery hero, Endeavor, with the most arrests under his belt. Basically, if you want to be the best hero, you go to the best school. We open at the testing site, which is a fake city. That's right, they are so rich that they can afford to build fake cities. While Midoriya is freaking out, he sees Uraraka taking the same test as him. He also sees Ida is there, who continues to dunk on Midoriya by telling him not to distract Uraraka as she is preparing herself. The test starts, but we cut back to when Midoriya swallowed the hair. All Might says that his body needs to digest the DNA, but it should kick in before the exam, and warns him that even though his body can take it now, he did it in a hurry, so the backlash might be intense. Spoiler warning, All Might was underplaying that statement. Back to the exam, Midoriya runs into a robot and becomes paralyzed with fear, but is saved by another examinee blasting a laser at him. This is Aoyama, played by Joel McDonald, who can shoot a laser from his belly button. Midoriya runs around, but all the robots are smashed already. We get to see Uraraka's quirk as she can make things float, and Ida used the boosters on his legs to go super fast. We take a break from the action to see the teachers watching the matches and decide to send out the 0-pointers. Turns out they are giant robots the size of a Megazord. Midoriya is super terrified and tries to get away, but just as Midoriya is about to leave or get crushed, he turns around to see that Uraraka had gotten herself trapped under some rubble. She can't move as the robot inches closer. And this is when we get the moment that hooked me on the manga and show. Because as soon as Midoriya sees a person he met that day was in trouble, it didn't matter that he might fail the test. It didn't matter if he had a quirk or not. It didn't matter that he might die. He didn't hesitate for 1 second to run back to try and save her. In that moment, he's able to channel One for All and use his powers in his legs to jump up, yell from the depths of his heart, smash, as he punches the giant robot in the face and instantly destroys it. You Say Run also plays during this, and it is one of the best times it's used. It is just such a good moment. You feel so happy for Midoriya because of all the crap he had to endure his whole life. The reaction from everyone else is all time. Uraraka, Ida, and the contestants can't believe it. The teachers are super impressed, and All Might smiles at him like the proud father he is. Yes, I know they aren't related, but they might as well be. When Midoriya snaps back to reality, Mike says that there is 1 minute left, and this is when he realized, oh wait, I don't have control over this power and I'm 6 stories in the air. As he falls, he realizes that his right arm and legs are totally broken. Now that he has control over the power, he realizes that he can barely handle it without his body exploding. Just before he hits the ground, however, Uraraka slaps him in the face, so it's official. Everybody in this show so far at some point in some way crapped all over my man Midoriya. I'm only kidding though, she just did that to make Midoriya float, but it doesn't do him much good as the test ends shortly after he hits the ground and he passes out. Everyone is stunned by his power, but Iida's the only one who understands what he did. Midoriya basically threw away everything to save Uraraka while he himself just ran off. But this is when he remembers the teachers were watching and they saw that. If this was a point system, why did the teachers need to watch in real time? Before we get more of that though, we are introduced to Recovery Girl, the school nurse, an elderly woman who has the power to heal people with her kisses. She's played by Julie Erickson here, but is eventually replaced by Lucy Christian, who also plays Uraraka. She heals Midoriya right up as she is the only reason they can hold these reckless exams. Uraraka almost got crushed. I'm pretty sure some kisses aren't going to fix that. Later that night, Midoriya is really stressed out about the exam, how he didn't get even 1 point and he can't get in touch with All Might now. Then he does get his test results, a video message from All Might, who reveals he will be teaching at UA High School this semester. He says Midoriya passed the written exam, but he got a 0 points on the practical. Midoriya starts to break down until All Might reveals that Uraraka went to the faculty and explained that the only reason Midoriya didn't get any points was because he was trying to save her, and begs them just to give him her points so he could pass. Before that though, she got the curse and roasted him by saying he's kind of plain looking and doesn't stand out. But she said it earnestly, which is more than Bakugo's swan dive comment. This is when All Might does confirm that the teachers were also grading on rescue points, and for rescuing Uraraka and everyone else, Midoriya got 60 rescue points, and for saving Midoriya, Uraraka got 45 rescue points, so they both passed. All Might showed him this so that he could see his actions inspire others. This brings Midoriya his trademark tears as All Might says he is part of the Hero Academia, which bookends the episode. And we also see his mom hook up the acceptance letter on the fridge, which is just a great way to end the episode. Characterization gets a 5. Everybody's super strong in this episode. Uraraka shows more depth, Iida shows more depth, and it's just great all around. Plus Midoriya is a standout as always. Story gets a 5. It is so good the way this is all set up with him saving Uraraka like that. Entertainment also gets a 5, as I said. You Say Run can boost anything, but the fact he uses it in one of the best sequences ever when he saves Uraraka by punching the 0-pointer, it's just so cool. Importance also gets a 5. This is super important. He gets accepted into UA and with the crucial information that All Might is going to be teaching him there. Like, that is super important. That's where we're going to end things today, however. I am going to review the rest of My Hero Season 1, and if you like this video, I shall look at the entire series because this is honestly some of the best superhero content I have ever seen. I mean, these first 4 episodes aren't super extraordinary, but they're really charming and set the tone for the series. Along with fun characters and an intriguing premise, the great moments like Midoriya smashing the 0-point robot are all-time awesome moments that I will always look back on with fondness. And my friends, this series would reach new heights as more chapters rolled out to show us this was going to be one of the best series to ever come out of Japan. By the way, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe because we upload videos just like this one on our Reamlore channel. What I Can Do Now, Episode 5. We open with seeing the exam results from the entrance exam, and of course Bakugo is topping the charts with 77 combat points and no rescue points. The teachers are discussing the exam results and how Bakugo stayed focused and took out the villains, and Midoriya's power seemed to hurt him and render him helpless, which gets the attention of a teacher in the background. Back on the beach, All Might and Midoriya meet up. All Might congratulates Midoriya on getting in and explains he didn't pull any strings for him. Midoriya asks about the power and All Might says he'll master it in time, but it's all or nothing right now. Training is the only way to regulate it. Something I didn't mention last time, the reason All Might has such dark, heavy ink lines is because it's a reference to the Golden Age Superman from the 30s, who was also drawn with big, heavy ink lines. As Midoriya is ready to leave for UA the next morning, his mom says she's proud of him before he makes it to UA. He tells us that 4 people got in through recommendations and 36 got in through entrance exams. 40 students separated in Class 1A and Class 1B. Midoriya arrives in Class 1A and hopes that Bakugo and Iida aren't here, and of course as soon as he walks in, they're both sitting right there arguing because nothing in Deku's life is easy. Iida and Midoriya formally introduce themselves, and Iida actually apologizes for making assumptions about Midoriya because he thought he was a slacker. Iida is a nice guy, it's just that he is super serious about school stuff. Uraraka is also there with Midoriya not being able to process being near a girl in a cute uniform. Before we could hear more, we cut back to a teacher saying how surprised he was that Bakugo and Midoriya both got into UA. Bakugo then puts Midoriya up against a wall and yells at him. He's the only one who should have gotten into UA. This is when Midoriya stands up for himself as he says that, like it or not, because of All Might saying he could become a hero, he is going to be one, and Bakugo can't do jack about it. So now I assume Bakugo is going to murder Midoriya. As Uraraka is talking to Midoriya, this is when the school teacher shows up inside of a sleeping bag. This is Aizawa, their homeroom teacher, who looks very tired, but don't be mistaken, he is basically the Batman of My Hero Academia. He's played by Alex Organ in the first season, but he's replaced by Christopher Woodcrab in the following season, and they both do a great job. He tells everyone to get their gym gear on and meet outside. Aizawa says this is going to be a quirk assessment test. Up until now, they have only done physical exercises without quirks, but today that is going to change, as they will be doing exercises with their quirks helping them. While this sounds fun, Aizawa brings up whoever has the lowest score is the weakest and will be expelled. All Might reads Aizawa's file and sees that he is going to single out Midoriya. Uraraka questions why you would do something like this, and Aizawa says if you want to be a pro, you need to push past your limits, to be ready for what the world has to throw at you. Good time to introduce the class of 20 here, which all get more screen time as the series goes on. We've already met Midoriya, Bakugo, Ayama, Uraraka, and Ida, but there's also Todoroki, Mineta, Sero, Jiro, Ojiro, Hagakure, Yaoyorozu, Sato, Su, Kirishima, Kaminari, Shoji, Koda, Ashido, and Tokoyami. Don't worry, we'll get to know them better as the series goes on. Aizawa designed these tests to push how far their quirks can go so he can accurately gauge what they need to improve. Midoriya, meanwhile, realizes that since he can't control his power yet, he is at a massive disadvantage. Back on the beach while they were talking, All Might says that to control the power, he has to visualize it traveling through his body, which Midoriya translates to an egg in a microwave. All Might says he needs to lower the wattage or else the egg might explode. Back with the tests, everybody's getting crazy good scores because of their quirks. Uraraka even sends a ball floating into space and got a score of infinities somehow. When it's Midoriya's turn to throw, he realizes that if he doesn't do good now, he is probably gone. Midoriya powers up One For All and throws the ball as Yusei Run starts to play, and he throws it at a normal distance. One For All didn't activate because Aizawa erased it. Midoriya realizes that Aizawa used to be a pro hero called Eraserhead, who can erase quirks just by looking at you. Midoriya didn't recognize him despite being a fanboy because, as All Might tells us while hiding behind the building, Eraserhead hates the media. He thinks that they just get in the way of hero work and isn't a fan of celebrity heroes. I really like this. It does build the world a little bit more by having heroes who don't care about the fame or money. Aizawa says that the judges made a mistake and that Midoriya shouldn't be here. He isn't ready and doesn't have control over his power, that just now he was probably going to break his arm again. That would get him killed in a real hero situation, so he's nothing but a liability. He has reckless passion, but Midoriya isn't going to do much if he can only throw one punch before going down. Aizawa says he's sorry before he returns the quirk and tells him he can throw one more time. Now he's probably right, but isn't the whole point of UA to train students to best use their power? And Aizawa put him in a lose-lose situation. Either he doesn't use the power and gets sent home because he came in last place, or he does use it, break his bones, and must forfeit. I have had it. Even Aizawa is dunking all over Deku, and it needs to stop. This kid is going to need therapy with all the abuse he's had to endure on a daily basis. Midoriya isn't going to give up though, so he channels One For All through his finger to throw the ball. Because of this, only his finger breaks, so he is still standing. Aizawa can't believe it, and even All Might is impressed at how cool Midoriya has gotten. That's the end of this episode, but how does it rank? Characterization gets a 5. While we do have more characters to learn about, the introduction to Aizawa is excellent, showing he's tough, but not mean for the sake of being mean. He's trying to make great heroes. And everyone else plays their characters super well. The story I'm giving a 5. While it's nothing to write home about, the tension is there, and you believe that Midoriya might get expelled if he doesn't do well. Entertainment gets a 4. Now that we're in school, it does get fun as we find out this won't be a normal school. Importance also gets a 5. We're introduced to the class and the teachers, so it's a must-watch. Rage, you damned nerd, episode 6. We start off right where we left off with great reactions from everyone. Aoyama is impressed, Uraraka is ecstatic, Ida is perplexed by his power, but the best reaction is from Bakugo, who is just slack-jawed and speechless at how Deku could have a quirk when he didn't get one as a kid. Seriously, when I first saw this in the book, I laughed out loud. Bakugo charges at Midoriya, demanding to know how he did that, but Aizawa stops him with his awesome capture weapon scarf. Bakugo remembers when they were kids talking about their quirks, with Bakugo reaffirming that Midoriya is just an annoying bug he could smash into the ground. As the fitness test comes to an end, we see that Yaoyorozu somehow got first. How is that possible? I mean, she isn't in bad shape or anything, but if this was a fitness test, shouldn't have Sato or Bakugo come in first since they are the most physically fit? Plus, Uraraka got infinity on her scores. How the heck can you not come in first when infinity is on your spreadsheet? And the one going home, unfortunately, in last place is Midoriya, so show over, I guess. No, it's not. Aizawa says he was lying before to get everyone to try their hardest, so no one's going home. Also, how did Hagakure get in front of Deku? Her quirk is invisibility. It doesn't help in any physical activity. And Midoriya is ripped, remember? All Might confronts Aizawa after the exercise and says that was a dirty trick. All Might read his file and knows about how often Aizawa expels anyone he thinks isn't worth it. Once he expelled a whole first-year class, so he was planning on sending Midoriya home. Aizawa admits that Midoriya doesn't have zero potential. If he did, then he'd be home right now. Aizawa explains that it's cruel to let someone dream of something that isn't going to happen. While All Might understands he is being kind in his own way, they are not going to get along. So yeah, they have the whole Superman-Batman dynamic down to a T. After school, Midoriya is heading home exhausted when Ida shows up to check on him and discuss the day, conflicted with how Aizawa ran the class. This is when Uraraka joins them and calls Midoriya Deku because that's what Bakugo calls him. Yeah, I didn't explain it in full in the last video, so I'll explain it now. Mostly because the dub doesn't explain what's going on with his name. In Japanese, if you change the letters around, Izuku becomes Deku, which is a pun on Deku Nobu, which means good for nothing, used by Bakugo to tell Midoriya he's worthless. Uraraka thinks the name could be cool as a hero name, and it's pretty cute. What she means is Deku can also be short for Dekiru, which means someone who can do anything. Despite saying it was an insult, Midoriya says it's cool for Uraraka to call him that. So look at that, after all the crud he went through, he finally made some friends, and this guy deserves it after all the nonsense he's had to put up with. The next day we figure out there are general courses that they take in addition to the hero course, and they eat 5-star meals from the hero lunch rush. Teaching hero stuff today is All Might, wearing what is called his Silver Age costume. Yeah, he has costumes that are named after the Bronze, Silver, and Golden Age of comics, although we never see him in the Bronze Age suit. He says that today they are doing fight training. Before that, he tells them that the most important part of being a hero is looking good, and gives them the costumes they designed. Basically how it works is they sketch out what they want and a costume company makes it for them. We then get to see everyone's costumes, and man, they all look cool. Aside from one person, Deku. Because while his mom was getting him food, she noticed a drawing on his desk of what he wanted his hero costume to be, so she had it made. I think that is really sweet, especially when he does change up the suit, the base always stays the same. This is also where she apologizes for giving up on Midoriya's dream so long ago, and promises to support him now no matter what. We see Deku's costume and it looks like that. Yeah, I'm not a fan of this design. It would get so much better, but now it's too weird. The bunny ears, the fake teeth, the suit making him look skinny, and the mask itself being a pullover. It's no wonder this suit didn't make it past this chapter. All Might says that while fights they see on the news happen outside, most fights happen indoors, so that's what they are training for today. They will be broken up into teams and fight on the sides of good and evil. The villains hide a bomb in the building, and the good guys either have to reclaim the weapon or capture the villains. Of course, All Might will step in if things get too rough. They draw lots, and we find out that Ida is teaming up with Bakugo, and Midoriya is teaming up with Uraraka. And of course, Midoriya is fighting Bakugo in the first match, but Midoriya isn't afraid. I also want to say I really like Uraraka's costume. It's very reminiscent of Saturn Girl's costume, and if you tie anything into the Legion of Superheroes, I'm just going to like it. Bakugo thinks that maybe Midoriya has just been lying about his quirk and is determined to destroy him. Midoriya is worried about fighting Bakugo because he is so talented, but that is why Midoriya wants to win, and Uraraka is down for that. We start and we see that All Might and the other students are watching and commentating on the fight. I like this because it breaks up the action and we get to see some character traits. Midoriya and Uraraka walk through the building until Bakugo shows up, guns or explosives blazing. Bakugo thankfully destroys the awful mask before charging at Midoriya again, but Midoriya slams him down with an arm throw. Midoriya says he analyzed every amazing hero, including Bakugo, and that he can call him Deku all he wants, but he's not a kid anymore. Deku, like Uraraka said earlier, is the name of a hero now. Bakugo stands back up, seeing Deku is shaking so much because he's terrified, but is still going to fight, and that is why Bakugo hates him. That brings this episode to an end, and how does it rank? Characterization gets a 5. Everyone is as strong as always, along with getting hints that there is more to Bakugo than just being a bully. Story gets a 4. It's a good setup for what's to come, with their rivalry coming to a head. Entertainment gets a 5. It is very entertaining, especially with the costume bits and the fighting. Importance gets a 5. It's the very first time Bakugo and Midoriya go for an all-out fight, and would be essential for both characters. Deku vs. Kacchan, Episode 7. We open with Bakugo and Midoriya as kids when they were friends until Bakugo's quirk manifested and he changed. All Might explains that the heroes and villains have capture tape, and if you wrap it around them, they lose. Deku and Bakugo continue to fight as Uraraka runs off. We see that Deku is using his tape like Aizawa to keep the advantage before running off. Deku's plan right now is to hold off and defeat Bakugo and then join up with Uraraka to take down Ida. This is also where Midoriya takes back what he said about not wanting to compete against Bakugo. More flashbacks with Kid Midoriya and Kid Bakugo, where Bakugo is bullying Midoriya. When Bakugo got his quirk, everyone around him sings his praises, talking about how awesome it is, and it goes to his head. I really really like this storytelling. It shows us that kids having powers like that can really impact their development, especially when it's a powerful quirk. It gets to the point where they let you get away with anything because you're so strong. After Midoriya doesn't get his quirk while exploring the forest, Bakugo falls into the river and Midoriya checks up on him. But Bakugo thinks that's an insult. "How dare you try to be a kind person, Deku? I'm the kindest one here." The reason Bakugo takes it as an insult is because he views it as someone with no power looking down on him like a weakling, when he is so much better than everyone else. Back with Ida and Uraraka, Ida devotes himself to villainy and goes over the top with a villainous monologue, which reveals Uraraka. Ida had a dastardly plan, however, as he has taken everything out of the room so she can't touch anything. His evil machinations have come to fruition, a true criminal mastermind. Bakugo explains how his quirk works, that he can sweat nitroglycerin from his hands and make it blow up. But with his new gauntlets, he can build up sweat for a massive explosion. He lets out a massive blast which destroys part of the building and says, "Quirk or not, you'll never beat me, Deku." Back with Ida and Uraraka, Uraraka floats herself up and tries to grab the weapon, but Ida uses his speed to move the bomb and says he can just keep doing that until time runs out. Bakugo is still taunting Deku, who is stumped on what to do, as he calls Uraraka. I was like, dude, ask her out after the test. And Bakugo thinks he's ignoring him again. Kirishima the Rock Guy asks All Might if this should stop since, Bakugo is saying he's going to kill Deku. All Might explains despite his attitude, Bakugo is not trying to kill or even badly hurt Midoriya. Still, All Might says if he does that giant explosion again, Bakugo will lose. All Might thinks he should stop this fight, but he wants Deku to get over his fears and stand up for himself. Bakugo then pulls off this awesome move, exploding behind Deku, blasting smoke in his face, and then blasting him with an explosion to the back. That impressed all of the students watching and reveals that he may come off as a hothead, but he is intelligent when it comes to fighting. I like that bit of commentary. It makes Bakugo a little bit like Goku, who is not the smartest academically, but he is a genius when it comes to fighting. Except as we'll see in a future episode, he is actually a genius academically. Bakugo just starts wailing on Deku while shouting that he should never forget what he is, a weakling. This is where Deku realizes he can't beat Bakugo without a quirk and that he has to use his power. Deku runs to the back of the building while Bakugo asks why he isn't using his quirk. Bakugo asks if Midoriya thinks he's better than him. Deku knows he is nothing compared to Bakugo, but that is why he wants to win, because Bakugo is amazing. This is when they charge at each other with everything they've got. All Might tells them to stop, but Deku suddenly calls for Uraraka to get into position because this was his plan. Instead of punching Bakugo, Deku punched upwards and destroyed the upper levels. This allowed Uraraka to use the rubble to attack Ida, slip past his defenses, and grab the bomb. Bakugo is devastated, asking if this is what he planned the whole time. Deku says he didn't want to use his power because he can't control it. This was all he could think of though as he collapsed, All Might declaring the heroes the winners. Characterization can get a 6. This is the episode we've desperately needed from these characters, going deep into Midoriya and Bakugo's relationship and showing off it wasn't as simple as a jock beating up a nerd. Story gets a 5. I really like the head-to-head story, not just being a physical fight but a personal one. Entertainment gets a 6. The fight setup is really fun too. Bakugo is always fun to watch as he explodes around the place, and Ida trying to be the villain is very funny. Importance gets a 5. It is the conclusion to Deku and Bakugo's first fight. It is vital that you watch this if you're binging My Hero. Bakugo Start Line, Episode 8. Midoriya is carted off as Bakugo is freaking out. Midoriya made him look like an idiot and somehow won the exercise. If they really fought, would Midoriya win? All Might tells him to calm down and says that whether he wins or loses, he can always take something away from an experience. I like this little bit from All Might. While Deku is his successor, he takes his job seriously and is devoted to teaching all of his students. All Might names Ida the MVP of the exercise, and Yaoyorozu explains why. Bakugo was hyper-focused on Midoriya and made poor decisions like the giant explosion. Midoriya did extreme damage to the building and himself, and Uraraka revealed herself by laughing, which is a no-no. The heroes did win, but mostly because this was training. If this was a real bomb, none of them would let out attacks like that. Ida was the only one with a sound strategy and adapted on the fly. Yaoyorozu was one of the 4 students who were admitted based on recommendations. And yes, we do have to bring back the questionable counter, because of her awful outfit, it rolls up to 2. This costume is way too revealing for her. And don't forget, she is a 15-year-old being sexualized here. Now in the story, this makes sense because her quirk is creation. She creates things from her skin, so it needs to be exposed, but you could have just said it goes through her clothes. This was just an excuse to show some skin. Moving on to the next match, we see that Todoroki and Shoji, the heroes, are going up against Ojiro and Hagakure, who are the villains. Hagakure takes off her clothes so she can go invisible, which is embarrassing for her since Ojiro is in the room. Even though she is invisible and walked into the test with no pants or shirt. This also teases a romance between the two that gets expanded in the Team Up Mission spinoff, and just to let you know, that story is super cute. Shoji uses his arm duplication to scout out the area, but Todoroki says it's not necessary, as he uses his ice powers to freeze the entire building and the villains in place. He is then able to secure the bomb with ease while looking like the Terminator with that red eye. Everyone is shocked at how good that guy is, as he also got in through recommendations. Bakugo is freaked out more than anyone, however, at just how strong Todoroki is. They then do the rest of the test with a cool montage showing off what the majority of the class could do. When you see them, you think, oh wow, these guys seem pretty cool, maybe I should just learn a little bit more about them. We also have to update the questionable counter, as the camera was focused on Yaoyorozu's butt while Mineta stared at it. It rolls up to 3. After the tests are finished, All Might says he is proud of all the students and runs off at super speed to check on Midoriya. Recovery Girl is mad at All Might because Midoriya is already a regular in her office. This is also where we learn that while the teachers know about All Might's weak form, only Recovery Girl and a few others know about One for All. Recovery Girl asks if being a natural-born hero is necessary since he is already the symbol of peace and the #1 hero. All Might says if people knew about a quirk as powerful as All Might's could be passed on, every villain, even every hero, would be after Midoriya. Midoriya wakes up late afternoon and walks back to class where the rest of Class A is waiting. They wanted to see if Midoriya was okay, and this is where we formally meet all of them because they are all super impressed with that match. Okay, we're going to speedrun this. Normally the show introduces them one at a time, but I'm gonna do it in one shot. Okay, go. Colleen Clickenbaird plays Yaoyorozu. David Matrogan plays Todoroki, Justin Cook plays Kirishima, Monica Rao plays Sue, Jesse James Grell plays Tokoyami/Dark Shadow, Trina Nishimori plays Jiro, Kyle Phillips plays Kaminari, Caitlin Glass plays Ashido, Brina Palencina plays Mineta, Christopher Bevins plays Sero, Ian St. Clair plays Shoji, Felicia Angel plays Agakure, Mike McFarlane plays Ojiro, Chris George plays Sato, and Greg Ayers plays Koda. All the voices you hear in this show are probably ones you've heard a million times in other dubbed animes. These people are in everything. What's a turnoff for most people who watch My Hero is the fact that there are so many characters. That's a fair criticism, but I don't mind it. Because it feels like you were just put into a fully established comic book world like Marvel or DC with all its different heroes. You have all these fun characters who might become your favorites, and what Horikoshi does best is plant story seeds early on to hint for the future. And the reason that so many characters work is because we barely, if ever, pull focus away from Deku or the main story. Where normally in other mangas we would spend way too much time on the characters that aren't really important to the story. All these characters are super fun and super ambitious and super memorable. In My Hero, I feel compelled to learn about all these heroes and their stories. During this meeting, it's also where we get the first instance of Ida doing the robot hands explaining things. Midoriya notices that Bakugo had left and goes after him. Midoriya tells Bakugo that he hasn't been hiding his quirk, but that he got it from someone else. He doesn't say All Might, but he does say he has no control over it right now. But he is going to get full control of this borrowed power and beat Bakugo legitly. Bakugo doesn't believe it and thinks Midoriya is just trying to make a fool of him again. He confesses that if he had fought Todoroki, he couldn't win, and that he agreed with Yaoyorozu. His attack was stupid. He actually pulls a Midoriya and starts to cry, and he says enjoy that win because Bakugo is going to be the #1 hero no matter what. All Might shows up to have a talk with Bakugo about pride, but he doesn't really listen and says he will become more famous without his help. An end credit scene, however, shows the villains of the show say that they are going to kill All Might. Characterization gets a 6, because even with the short time we spend with many of the class, we're already getting a feel for their personalities, and we're seeing Bakugo's vulnerable side, making him even more three-dimensional. Story gets a 5. The story continues to be good, as the fallout of the last episode directly impacts this one and where the story goes. Entertainment gets a 4. It is just fun watching superheroes do their thing, fighting each other, and we get snippets of what their powers are going to be like. Importance gets a 4. Now this is less important because it's mostly fallout, but I think it's still necessary because we are formally introduced to the rest of the class. The greatest villain in all of anime. I am super excited today because I get to talk about the episode leading up to the debut of my favorite anime villain, Tomura Shigaraki. Now I am sick and tired of people in the comments of these My Hero videos saying I'm biased toward this series, calling it the best anime. Why would you say I was biased to this series? Some people, man. On an unrelated note, it is really hard to find Shigaraki hands. A few of the characters used in My Hero were characters from Horikoshi's previous mangas, like Shigaraki, who was reused from a character who hated war and wanted to use his power of disintegration to destroy every sword in Japan. With that, I'm Rocko from Reamlore, and let's dive in. By the way, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe because we upload videos just like this one on our Reamlore channel. We upload a great new video every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, so be sure to subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss any of our uploads. Yeah, just do your best, Ida. Episode 9. We start the episode off with the media gathered outside of UA. Now the reason they are doing this is because everybody wanted an exclusive with All Might. They want to know why he is a teacher and how he is adapting as said teacher. They couldn't get anything really, and when they try to barge in, a giant metal door closes to keep them out. The camera guy explains the UA barrier keeps anyone without an approved ID out, and this is when we see Shigaraki standing outside. So, what are we doing in class today? Well, before that, Aizawa says he looked over the fight footage and basically reaffirms what All Might said, with Bakugo not sulking and Midoriya not breaking his limbs. What we are doing now is picking a class rep, or a president if you're from the US. Everybody wants to be the rep since it's a good way to get noticed as someone with leadership qualities. Ida stands up and says that they should vote to see who gets picked, and shock of all shocks, Midoriya gets 3 votes and becomes the rep. Uraraka mutters she voted for him, and Ida is upset that he didn't get a single vote. Interestingly too, despite everyone besides Ida getting 1 vote, Yaoyorozu got 2. During lunch, Midoriya is confiding with Ida and Uraraka that even though he said he wanted it, he's not sure if he can live up to the responsibility. This is where Ida admits he voted for Midoriya because he thinks he is a great leader. Uraraka figures out that Ida is filthy rich, and he confirms that he is from a long line of speed-based heroes. Ida is the younger brother of the famous hero with 65 sidekicks working for him called Ingenium. Ida says that he wants to be just like his brother, a leader who leads his sidekicks to victory, although he believes he isn't ready. He thinks Midoriya is because of what he did in the practical exam. Midoriya is about to tell Ida that he is qualified when suddenly the alarm starts sounding because somebody had breached the barrier. Everyone is panicking by crowding the halls and crushing people when Ida sees that the press outside were the ones that got in. They were hounding Aizawa and Mike with microphones and questions, but they refuse to answer, and Aizawa says they'll just wait for the cops to kick them out. Mike before this, by the way, was thinking about beating them up because they are like villains trespassing, and honestly I wouldn't blame them. These reporters here are the absolute worst. Ida tries to tell his classmates to calm down, but nobody's listening. He asks himself what Midoriya or his older brother would do when he sees Uraraka and asks her to make him float. After that, he uses his engines to speed into the air, hits the doorway above everyone, and tells everyone to knock it off. Everything's fine, relax. The cops then show up to take the press away. Because of this, back in class, Midoriya says that Ida should be the one leading the class. Everyone agrees after he took charge and helped everyone. Ida accepts this despite Yaoyorozu getting 2 more votes than him. Outside, the teachers look at the barrier and realizes that a villain must have broken through. We cut to the next day where Mount Lady and Kamui Woods are fighting a villain when All Might drops by and defeats the villain. He goes to defeat more villains on his way to school, noting how his powers are fading faster since he gave his powers to Midoriya. This is when we flash back to All Might berating Midoriya for telling Bakugo, but Midoriya says he felt guilty and wanted to be honest with him, which All Might understood. He thinks it's okay since Bakugo didn't really believe him. In the classroom, what they are doing today is rescue training, specifically from natural disasters. This special training is at an off-campus facility, so they are going on a bus ride. While everyone grabs their costume, Midoriya doesn't because he realized how terrible it looked. That's not true. It was so damaged he's going with gym clothes. While on the bus, Sue, the frog girl, says that Midoriya's power is very similar to All Might's. Although Kirishima, the rock guy, says that All Might doesn't hurt himself and is kinda jealous since his hardening quirk isn't super fancy. He says that out of everyone here, the pro quirks are Todoroki and Bakugo, but Sue says that Bakugo won't be popular since he's always, Bakugo. Kaminari, the electric kid, jumps in saying that it's been like 3 days and Bakugo's personality is already flaming garbage. For once, Bakugo is getting picked on instead of Midoriya. They arrive at their location and meet Pro Hero 13, played by Morgan Berry, who is wearing a spacesuit as well as being one of Uraraka's favorite heroes. They see a bunch of locations with different disasters, the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or the USJ. As they say, it's like Universal Studios Japan. Also, one of the zones is called the Fire Zone, which is constantly on fire, and I'm sorry, but how is something constantly on fire? Doesn't everything burn up eventually? All Might isn't here though because he did too much hero work and is burned out, but will be back for the tail end of the exam. 13 says that her quirk is called Black Hole, which sucks up anything in its path. She used it to clear debris, but notes that it could be very easily used to kill. With all the regulation of quirks, it's easy to forget that they can be dangerous. Being a hero is about helping others, not blasting your enemy with powers. She also dabs for some reason at the end. Suddenly, the power to the USJ flutters and a black portal forms at the water fountain. And finally, Tomura Shigaraki makes his proper debut. I love this guy the second he walked out with his crew of villains. I just enjoyed how creepy he looked with the dead hands all around him, as well as scratching himself and constantly making video game references. He's played by Eric Vale, who gives this super creepy character a super creepy voice. He shows up with a bunch of nobody villains, as well as Kurogiri, played by Chuck Huber, the cloud guy with the power to teleport, as well as the giant black bird brain guy called Nomu, played by Justin Cook. Aizawa confirms that this isn't a test and those are real villains to end the episode. Characterization gets a 5. This is a great character episode for Ida. Before he seemed like the average school-obsessed student, but this shows why he's so determined to be a hero, because his brother is a great hero and Ida wants to be just like him. And it shows his development. Before he ran away from Uraraka who needed help, but now he's more than willing to help his classmates. The story is getting a 3. The story is fine, it's not amazing, but it's a fun time. Entertainment gets a 4. It's a fun episode. I mean, I would have liked to see more of Shigaraki, but the class stuff is enjoyable. Importance gets a 5. This is the debut of Shigaraki. I mean, he doesn't do anything, but he shows up with his goons ready to kick the story up several notches. Encounter with the Unknown, episode 10. The villains arrive and note that the only real heroes here are Eraserhead and 13. All Might isn't here. They were counting on that as the schedule said he would be here, and Aizawa figures out they used the press as a cover to sneak onto campus. This upsets Shigaraki, so he decides that it would be best if they killed a few kids to get his attention. Everyone is confused because the alarms aren't sounding, but Todoroki thinks that one of the villains has a quirk that jams the signal. Aizawa tells 13 to get out of here with the students and get help. Midoriya notes that Aizawa can't fight them all because he works better in one-on-one fights, but Aizawa says you can't be a pro if you only have one trick. We then get the best animated fight we've seen so far, with Aizawa canceling out quirks of bad guys left and right, and absolutely destroying everyone with his scarf and ninja moves. Aizawa blinks, however, which allows Kurogiri to teleport in front of the class, stopping them from leaving. Bakugo and Kirishima try to blast Kurogiri, but he's unaffected. Kurogiri then teleports most of the class to different locations in the USJ to split them up. Midoriya, Sue, and Mineta get teleported to the shipwreck zone, where they run into villains suited for this environment. Yes, this is where Mineta shows up, and well, he's the worst character in the show. Because all his character is I'm a pervert. When I first saw the guy on my first viewing, I didn't think he was that bad because he always got beat up for being a perv, but after consideration, it's not that funny most of the time, and it's just really creepy, especially something he says in season 4, sheesh. In this review show, I will not go in depth on things he does, but I will be adding points on the questionable counter every time he does something weird. These three figure out that if the villains spend so much time planning this out, then they probably have a way to kill All Might. And even if they don't, the villains are still going to kill the students to send a message. Mineta is not handling this well and starts panicking, but Midoriya says that they need to stand up and face these villains. Elsewhere, we see that Todoroki on his own is taking down villains, Bakugo and Kirishima are brawling with some bad guys, and the other students spread all throughout, as well as the ones still fighting Kurogiri. Back at UA, All Might is resting but can't get through to 13 and Aizawa. This is also where we meet Principal Nezu, played by Jerry Joel, who is a cat, bear, dog thing. Nezu says that All Might shouldn't push himself and tells him to rest some more. Back at the plot, Shoji tells everyone their classmates are safe. 13 tells Ida that he needs to get out of here and tell the teachers what is happening. Ida doesn't want to leave, but everyone is adamant since the alarms outside would alert the heroes, so no villain would follow him. Kurogiri, being the most competent bad guy ever though, says that, well, why did you tell me what your plans were? Now I'm going to stop you. But 13 says it's because he can't. Midoriya, while planning what to do, realizes that Kurogiri warped Sue here where she has the advantage, meaning they have no idea what their quirks are. This is also why they separated them and are being cautious. They go over quirks, and Sue can basically be a frog, and Mineta can use these balls which can stick to anything aside from himself. Bring down the questionable counter for that power alone, it rolls up to 4. And this is where I have to ask, how on earth did Mineta pass the entrance exam with the robots if that's all his power can do? I doubt that he rescued people, but that is the only way I think he could have passed. Actually, Horikoshi did explain in a behind-the-scenes page of the manga. He justified that Mineta stopped the robots from moving with his quirk, and the goal of the test was to stop the robots, not destroy them. But that's still a big stretch. The villains are tired of waiting and decide to split the boat in half, which causes Mineta to freak out. And Sue asks the question, is this really the career path you want, Mineta? He freaks out some more, saying he thought he wouldn't face death this soon. Mineta, you don't sign up to be a firefighter when you're afraid of getting burned. He also says he didn't want to die before he touched, just bring down the board, it rolls up to 5. Midoriya refuses to give up and is confident they can win. Midoriya jumps off the boat and flicks down with one of his fingers, which sends the water away from them. This episode also features the worst use of You Stay Run in the entire show, when Mineta defeats the bad guys with his quirk, forcing all of them to stick together, trapping them. Just because the song could back anything doesn't mean it should. And that's how this episode ends. Characterization, I'm giving a 3. While Aizawa shows off he's cool and Ida decides to help, Shigaraki and the bad guys don't do much. Mineta's character also brings the whole thing down. Story's getting a 2. The story is alright, setting up the fights and putting the characters where they need to be. Entertainment is 3. The fun is dragged down because of Mineta, but you still have Aizawa beating people up, so it balances out. Importance gets a 3. This was kind of just an opening fight episode, but it is important to watch, as are most of these episodes, to be real with you. That's what you get when you review a serialized series. Game over, episode 11. Instantly, Mineta says another gross thing, so bring back the board, it rolls up to 6. But Midoriya is just happy that they made it out of there okay. They figure out that Aizawa might not be able to fend off all those villains by himself. Midoriya is not saying that they should jump into the fight, but try to just pick people off. Back with Todoroki, he has easily frozen the villains and just insults them by saying they barely have control of their quirks. He wonders how the villains plan to kill All Might since these guys are street-level punks. He then tells a villain that his cells will die off the longer he is frozen, and he is going to make it worse unless they tell him how they plan to kill All Might. Kaminari, Jiro, and Yaoyorozu are fighting off villains, but Kaminari is pretty useless. His electricity quirk only works by shooting out in all directions, so he'd hit the girls, but he figures out he can be used as a stun gun. They all take out some villains with Jiro using her sound powers while Yaoyorozu is using her creation powers. During the fight, Yaoyorozu makes a sheet of insulation which allows Kaminari to fry all of the villains with his electricity. Shooting off this much voltage does make Kaminari stupid for a while as it fries his brain. And this is where we bring down the questionable counter again. It rolls up to 7, because Horikoshi deemed it necessary to show up the 15-year-old Momo with her clothes ripped. Back with the Razorhead, Shigaraki finally gets into the fight and goes straight for Aizawa. Shigaraki figures out that when Eraser's hair falls down, he stopped using his quirk, because he has to blink. Shigaraki is also destroying parts of Aizawa with his awesome power of disintegration, which is just so fitting for Shigaraki. Shigaraki thinks that Aizawa is cool, however, but informs him he's not the final boss. Well, duh, that's obviously the Rock. Kidding. It's actually Nomu who starts slamming Aizawa's face into the ground. 13 is trying to fend off Kurogiri, but she's not a combat hero, so Kurogiri quickly turns the power around on her. It's pretty brutal, all things considered, watching the back of her disintegrate. Ida gets new motivation and uses his speed quirk to run towards the exit. Kurogiri tries to stop him, but his classmates all work together to help Ida get out. This is also where Uraraka notices Kurogiri has a brace of armor floating in the smoke. Shigaraki, meanwhile, asks the broken Aizawa what he thinks of the bioengineered symbol of destruction, Nomu. Bakugo, meanwhile, is destroying all the villains with Kirishima backing him up. Kirishima wants to find his classmates since he feels guilty about getting in 13's way earlier, but Bakugo tells him to shove it. He is going to go and destroy Kurogiri since he is their way of travel. Taking him out means the villains can't leave, and notes that while he is blowing up another villain, that they're all low-level rank goons. The class won't have much trouble taking them out. Kirishima is surprised at how rational he is being and decides to go with him. Turns out he was right, as all the other students are having little problems taking out their forces, and Ida finally gets out of the USJ to get some help. He's able to do this after Uraraka floats Kurogiri in the air, figuring out he must have a physical form if he's wearing armor. Nomu just keeps breaking Aizawa's bones as Shigaraki insults him. Your power is irritating, but it's nothing impressive. In the face of real power, you might as well be a quirkless child. Aizawa tries to erase Nomu's quirk, but Nomu is super strong without powers, as strong as All Might. Midoriya, Tsu, and Mineta are horrified watching this as Kurogiri tells Shigaraki that Ida got outside, which upsets him something fierce. This is when Shigaraki explains that he has a quirk. Not a superpower, just a quirk where he scratches his neck and body when he's stressed. Now I learned the reason for this is because of his power. It disintegrates all the moisture in his body, which makes him itch. It's also why his skin is so gray most of the time. He says in a scratchy voice that if Kurogiri wasn't their warp gate, he'd tear apart every atom in his body. This is also where we learn Shigaraki is a gamer, because he says that if a bunch of pros show up, it's game over. Back to the title screen. That makes me so happy. The big bad of this manga/anime is a total gamer. Do you think he plays Helldivers? I mean, he talks like he plays Final Fantasy, but I'm betting on Helldivers. Shigaraki says they are just going to leave since All Might isn't here, but he wants to leave the symbol of peace broken. Which is when Shigaraki apparently has another quirk as he zooms to where Midoriya and the gang are and reaches to disintegrate Tsu. But as he grabbed her, Aizawa used his power to erase his quirk before Nomu slammed his head into the rocks again. Also, bring back the board for something Mineta did. It rolls up to 8. Not going to bug you, but to let you know, it is very satisfying to see Tsu keep his head underwater for a bit. This brief interference by Aizawa allows Midoriya to hit Shigaraki with a smash, but shockingly, his arm doesn't break. While Midoriya is happy about this, he realized that Nomu got in the way of the smash. It did nothing to Nomu, and Midoriya realizes that Nomu is how they plan to kill All Might. Shigaraki wonders if Midoriya is one of All Might's disciples, but doesn't care as he orders Nomu to kill him. He reaches to grab Tsu and Mineta, but that is when All Might shows up. All Might bursts through the doors and proudly proclaims that I am here, and for seemingly the first time, he isn't smiling. He is just really mad. But Shigaraki's happy as his game gets a continue. Characterization gets a 4. We get to see more of Shigaraki's character, and I really like his personality. Plus, we get to see more shades of Bakugo in a battle, showing off in his own way he can be calm and rational. The story I'm giving a 4. The story is progressing very naturally, and it is engaging, ending with the great scene of All Might arriving really mad. Entertainment gets a 6. You know what's fun? Watching Shigaraki do his thing. His fight with Aizawa is great, as well as all the other fights we see throughout this episode. Importance gets a 5. This is where the arc really picks up steam, and it's an important must-watch. All Might, episode 12. All Might thought something was wrong when he couldn't get through to his colleagues. All Might ran into Ida, who explained the situation, and he decided that he was going to take care of it. After all this waiting, the heroic piece of trash shows up. All Might effortlessly takes out all of the thugs before rescuing Aizawa and the trio being attacked by Shigaraki. He even manages to knock the hand mask off his face. Trust me, dude, it's a miracle he can keep that thing on. Shigaraki starts freaking out without his mask, mentioning his father, before he grabbed his mask and complains that the government hero relies on violence. Although he does put it together that All Might is getting weaker. Midoriya tells All Might that he can't fight them, that Nomu took a full-powered smash, but All Might gives him a peace sign and a smile. All Might says he will handle this as he fights Nomu, but none of All Might's attacks work on the monster. Shigaraki explains that Nomu's quirk is shock absorption, and that the only way to defeat him is to slowly gouge out his flesh. Although Nomu isn't going to sit back and let you do that. All Might says screw that noise as he gives Nomu a suplex, Brock Lesnar style. Midoriya wants to help but is totally outmatched and would probably just get used as a hostage. Although Midoriya knows that All Might was already at his limit today, Kurogiri jumped in to help Nomu by using his teleport. He manages to trap All Might and allows Nomu to grab his weak spot. Shigaraki orders Kurogiri to drag All Might into his warp gate and close it, allowing Kurogiri to slice All Might in half. Midoriya runs back into the fight despite being outmatched, and Kurogiri gets in his way to stop him. But this is when Bakugo, Todoroki, and Kirishima show up to help. Because of Todoroki freezing Nomu, All Might manages to escape while Bakugo pins Kurogiri to the floor. He explains that earlier he just missed Kurogiri's body. He noticed the neck armor too and realized that he did have a physical form. It's just it was concealed by all that smoke. Yeah, why did you wear armor that reveals your body, Kurogiri? Bakugo also explains that he's going to explode Kurogiri if he tries to do anything, and they'll have to clean up his body parts. Shigaraki is impressed, the fact that a bunch of kids managed to stop his two strongest men. This is also where he name drops the League of Villains, which no one has ever used before, shockingly. And yes, I much prefer League of Villains than Paranormal Liberation Front or whatever their new name was. It's just the League of Villains sounds like a classic villain team name from the golden age of comics. Shigaraki has a plan to deal with this though, and that's to order Nomu to just get up. That's good leadership right there. Despite being frozen, Nomu breaks off his limbs and regrows them. Normally you would only get one quirk when you're born, but Nomu apparently has multiple. Nomu has been genetically made to destroy All Might. He then orders Nomu to kill Bakugo, but fortunately All Might shoved him out of the way. All Might is furious that Shigaraki didn't hold back against these kids. What do you want from me? I'm evil! As Shigaraki explains, Bakugo was threatening to kill Kurogiri, and Midoriya earlier tried to kill him with a maxed out punch, so they aren't angels. But to play devil's advocate, my dude, you were trying to kill all of them. This is when we hear at least part of what Shigaraki's motivation is. You think that you can get away with being as violent as you want, as long as it's for the sake of others. Well, you know what, All Might? That pisses me off. Why do people get to decide some violent acts are heroic while others are villainous, casting judgment on what's good and what's evil? You think you're the symbol of peace? You're just another government-sponsored instrument of violence, and violence always breeds more violence. I'll make sure the whole world understands that once you're dead. Now you can clearly see that he hates heroes and All Might, but we don't know exactly why. It is explained in future detail as the manga anime continues down the line. All Might in response says Shigaraki's nothing but a lunatic. Criminals always try to make their actions sound noble, but Shigaraki is just doing this because he likes it. Shigaraki actually agrees with that. He's just trying to destroy All Might because he wants to, and that will tie into his story later on. Now, what a lot of people didn't understand is something that I caught right away. Shigaraki in his debut was not that threatening, which caused a lot of people to say that this manga was going to suck because its antagonist was a wimp. What I saw was that this villain was a lot like Cell from Dragon Ball, as in he starts out weak but grows in power to become the biggest threat. And you can see that with how he is presented. This isn't his limit, he can be so much more. Midoriya and the other students want to jump in to help, but All Might says that they need to hold back. Midoriya is worried because he's hurt and almost out of time, but All Might gives him a thumbs up, telling him it's going to be alright. Shigaraki orders his minions to kill all of them. It's time to clear this level and go home. All Might knows he barely has a minute left in this form, but he needs to stop these villains because he is the world's symbol of peace and justice. This is when we get the best fight scene in all of season 1, with All Might going to fight Nomu again. Backed by Yusei Run, he just hits Nomu over and over again, reasoning that Nomu's quirk is shock absorption, not nullification, meaning there was a limit to how much punishment he could take. Because of this, All Might just wails on him over and over again until he is ready to go beyond plus ultra and flings the monster out of the USJ using beyond 100% of his power. Now, I don't remember if I mentioned this earlier, but My Hero in the first season does not have good fight scenes. This was mainly because the manga didn't have great fight scene art at the beginning, but this was the first fight in the series that was really good. By the way, if you want an example of how to draw comic or manga fight scenes, check out Boom Studios' Power Rangers or the Fairy Tail manga. The episode ends with All Might standing tall as smoke and mist surround him as his time as All Might runs out. This causes Shigaraki to freak out again. He cheated. Characterization, I'm giving a 7. The characters are all great. We see a lot of All Might's determination along with some hints of Shigaraki's motivation. Story I'm giving a 5. The story is excellent with All Might trying to push past his limits to save his students, and the students running in to help. Entertainment gets a 7. This is one of the most fun episodes of the show. The fights are excellent, including All Might being amazing. Importance gets a 5. We start the big rivalry between many characters in this episode that will continue throughout the series runtime. In Each of Our Hearts, episode 13. The episode starts with Kaminari about to be killed. That's fun. And it's by the electric guy who was jamming their signal earlier and keeping their alarms off. Yaoyorozu and Jiro are helpless to do anything against this guy. Shigaraki is not happy seeing as Nomu was sent flying, and he thinks that All Might is just as strong as he ever was. He is freaked out by All Might taunting him, scratching his neck again. Midoriya knows that All Might is bluffing because of the steam coming off his body. All Might's plan is just to scare them into surrendering or at least running away. Shigaraki is furious about all of this, wishing Nomu was here, but Kurogiri pumps up Shigaraki by pointing out All Might is hurt, the kids are afraid, and their minions are getting back up. If they work together, they can still kill All Might, which Shigaraki agrees with. The big end boss is right here. Shigaraki and Kurogiri charge at All Might, but Midoriya uses One for All, breaking his legs, to smash Kurogiri in the neck brace area. But Kurogiri was ready this time as he teleports Shigaraki's disintegrating hand in Midoriya's face, with Shigaraki laughing as he's going to kill Midoriya. But then he gets shot in the hand. Professor Snipes shoots 2 more bullets into the electric villain holding Kaminari, as we see Ida brought back the entire UA facility, who are all pro heroes ready to fight. Also, quick mention, 2 of these heroes, the guy with the purple hair and the one with the purple sleeping mask, never get mentioned or shown again. They just appear and we never see them again. The thugs charge at the pros, but they are pros, so President Mike just screams at them while the heroes just effortlessly take out everyone. The pros are here. Game over. Shigaraki tries to leave with Kurogiri, but he gets shot in both of his legs. As Kurogiri teleports Shigaraki out, he yells at All Might, "While I may have failed this time, your days are numbered, All Might. Symbol of peace, I am going to kill you." The teachers arrest the thug, save the other students, and Midoriya has a moment with All Might thanking him for the rescue. Back with Shigaraki in his bar, he yells at his master behind a screen that he was wrong, that All Might wasn't weak. His master, played by John Allen Swayze, says that he wasn't wrong, but he did underestimate them, thankfully failing under the League of Villains name instead of his own. There's also someone else on the line with the master. They make it clear that they made the Nomu, but Kurogiri didn't know where Nomu was, so he couldn't teleport him with them. Shigaraki also mentions that there was a kid who had the same powers as All Might, and then if it wasn't for Midoriya, he would have killed the symbol of peace. The master says that this wasn't futile after all. He tells Shigaraki to gather up villains while he remains in the shadows, for Shigaraki to become a symbol himself. Show the world that they should be afraid of you. The rest of the episode is basically recap and cleanup. How the class were safe and that Aoyama was somewhere secret. Okay, buddy, you can just say that you were scared and hiding. This is also where we meet police detective Tsukauchi, played by Alejandro Saab, who is investigating this. He's the one giving updates and the one who found and captured Nomu. All Might explains in the nurse's room that he shortened his time again, but it couldn't be helped. This is also where we see Tsukauchi and All Might know each other. The episode ends with All Might proud of his students for weathering the storm. We also see that Ida and Uraraka waited for Midoriya to get out of the nurse's office so they could walk home together, which just made me happy to see. They also tease the next big villain of season 2 as we meet the hero killer Stain. The finale to the season was great. Unlike most people, I really liked Shigaraki from the moment he showed up, and it was intense and a great way to close out the first season. Characterization gets a 5, everyone is really strong despite this being a cleanup episode, getting a good feel of everyone's characters, and Tsukauchi is a nice change from the generic angry police chief. And you all know how much I don't like angry police chiefs. The story's getting a 4. It is weaker because it is cleanup, but it's nice cleanup, wrapping up the season with a nice story. Entertainment gets a 3. The fighting is pretty much over, so it's not that much fun, but jokes here and there are funny. Importance gets a 2. As I said, it's a wrap-up, so it's not completely necessary to watch, but if you want the conclusion, you should watch it. My overall thoughts on season 1 is that it's pretty good. I will say that it's not amazing, but it keeps you interested and invested about what's going on, and the superhero gimmick makes it so different from every other manga and anime out there right now. Yeah, it has a lot of tropes and character archetypes and a ton of manga, but when it's good, it's really good. The characters are fun, the story's engaging, the villains, while not super fleshed out, are still threatening and cool to watch, and it only goes up from here. Seasons 2 and 3 are when the book and show really take off and start getting into S-tier anime territory. Stuff like Midoriya vs Todoroki, everything with Stain, the Vanguard Action Squad, All for One, and a conclusion of the Midoriya and Bakugo feud. Once again, I say this is my favorite manga series, and it deserves the title of one of the greatest mangas of all time, even as it's in its closing moments. If you like this season 1 retrospective, let me know. I'd love to cover the rest of the show. My name is Rocko from Remore. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all later.